Hello and welcome to today's edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of Pitchling, the buyer-seller engagement platform. In our show today, we speak with Fred Kopstek, consultant, trainer, and coach, our news roundup from the world of sales, SaaS, and startups in NS3, and finally, Stuart Butterfield, co-founder and CEO of Slack, on what you absolutely must get right for your customers. Let's dive right in. First, the news in NS3.
In this bulletin, user privacy goes mainstream with privacy changes in iOS 14.5. SurveyMonkey launches Brand Tracker and Industry Tracker. India's upgrad raises $120 million for EdTech. Deloitte's survey shows CPOs are agile despite uncertainty. Apple has released the latest version of its mobile operating system, which includes the much-discussed App Tracking Transparency feature. This will enable users to control which apps share their data with third parties for ad targeting purposes. Other new features include Watch Unlocking, which could help users avoid the annoying "I can't unlock my phone with my masked face" phenomenon, plus new emojis and more. SurveyMonkey has launched SurveyMonkey Brand Tracker and SurveyMonkey Industry Tracker to help companies monitor shifts in market perception and react quickly. Both use artificial intelligence to launch trackers, monitor industry and brand performance, and uncover insights. SurveyMonkey Brand Tracker enables companies to continuously measure brand performance, while SurveyMonkey Industry Tracker allows investment and finance research professionals to understand changing market dynamics. Indian edtech startup Upgrad reportedly raised $120 million in a new funding round backed by Singapore's Temasek. The financing set a reported valuation of between $575 million and $675 million for the 6-year-old Mumbai-based company. Upgrad describes itself as India's largest online higher education company, offering courses in data technology, digital marketing, and product management in partnership with Indian and global universities. Deloitte's 10th Annual Global Chief Procurement Officer Survey 2021 revealed that CPOs harness the agility to deliver and protect value despite uncertainty in the wake of the pandemic. The CPO is playing an increasingly complex, integrated, and strategic role in the pandemic and the resulting supply chain disruptions. Procurement agility masters outperform their peers on all the major performance metrics. These high performers are capitalizing on new technologies and flexible operating models to adapt to the turbulent marketplace and thrive in the next normal. Thank you for watching. All links are also available in the show notes. If you have news about sales, SaaS, or your startup, share it with us at ns3@pitch.link. See you next time.
Meet Fred Kopstek, a consultant, trainer, coach, and an expert helping sales professionals around the world to discover new and more powerful ways of how they can do business, build mutually beneficial relationships with their customers, and increase revenue. With his unique style and pragmatic approach, Fred has worked in more than 35 countries, delivering projects that range from implementing a European academy for a leading beer brand, developing sales skills in the Middle East for global healthcare companies, and introducing account development and sales leadership models in Latin America and Europe for IT and engineering multinationals. Now listen to this interesting conversation with Fred Kopstek on how to build your sales through partnerships.
Yeah, well done. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure when somebody wants to talk. I'm a sales geek. Yeah, I love this stuff, and I love thinking about approaches and thinking what can make people current and what can make people effective. End of the day, that's what I'm about. I want to help people get better at what they do, and my world is sales world, so that's where I try to practice that. And as I say, with the experience with the stuff that I've been doing, I can see that sales is taking very much a move towards being more collaborative than ever. We can go through all the evolution of sales and the stuff that we saw in the 60s, psychological selling, if you like, and 80s, close, and of course the consultative stuff of the 90s. But now people are having to be more collaborative. This was pre-COVID. I would say that even more so now, salespeople are going to have to work tightly with customers, help them, guide them, be in the thing together. And I was very aware of this, and lots of the brilliant sales models in the books that you talk about that are already out there. But I came across this concept of partnering skills, PQ. Now, everyone will probably have heard of IQ, and I'm sure many people will have heard of EQ, emotional intelligence. And I think of PQ, or partnering intelligence, as almost like the lesser known cousin in the family. And these are the skills that somebody who's good at partnering will have and are able to use, and often use quite consciously and quite deliberately. So I looked at this actually because I was doing quite a lot of work in channel management at the time. I was doing quite a lot with full-on indirect sales, partnering sales, if you like. But as I looked at these skills, I thought, this is relevant to any salesperson. It does not matter whether you're in direct or indirect. If you're doing any kind of, not purely transactional, but anything above that, these skills, if you can get your head around them and start to use them in the approach that's most suitable for you, they're going to make you better. It's like a veneer. It's an icing on the cake, if you like. And so the more I looked at it, the more I thought, well, how can I get these things on one hand with the stuff that people are probably already doing quite well on the other hand, and bring them together to make sure their approach is really refined, really good for the current environment. And that's kind of how the thinking came about, and what I've done in the book really is bring those two things together through a framework which I developed to help people's thinking, to be that more sophisticated salesperson, if you like.
Customers will not buy from anyone they don't trust. None of us will. Even if you are going into a store, if you don't trust the store, you're not going to buy from them, right? So,
Very true. Yeah.
so, so what sort of triggered this, or cemented your thought that, what, PQ is something we need to talk about and bring into the mainstream discourse?
Well, interestingly, if you look, PQ has 6 elements. They're all interrelated. They all build off each other. When you talk about them, obviously you kind of have to do them in order. You can't talk about all at once. But whenever I speak about the elements, I always speak about trust first. That's the first element, because exactly as you've said, it is the basis of relationships. It's a basis of good, solid communication. Communication is a sales skill. It's something that people need to be able to do. So I looked at this. I thought, oh yeah, kind of interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. Kind of, and moving through the elements of PQ, it's kind of, well, trust is all about being able to work together and sort of having mutually beneficial outcomes. Oh, look, second element of partnering skills is having a win-win orientation. Now, ever since I've been involved with sales, that's been something that's been drummed into me. And then as I've taken on a sales trainer role, it's something that underpins every single piece of work that I do. So we talk about win-win, and I looked at this and went, whoa, the next one is interdependence. We've got to collaborate. We've got to work together. My success is going to be based on some of your success, and you're going to have to do some things. I'm going to have to do some things. I'm going to lose a bit of control here. So I'm going to have to trust you. And so these things keep repeating back to do that. And it's as I was just reading through this stuff, it's all like the hairs on the back of my neck sort of went, this stuff is so about modern selling. I want to get it out there. I'm going to start using it. I can do so much in the training that I'm doing, but if I can sort of push it out on a broader spectrum, then fantastic. Other people can start to use this. I'd be very, very happy if I can sort of contribute that way.
So what's the framework that you came up with?
So the method, the framework, if you like, is the value framework, VALUE. Yeah, of course, it's about adding value, etc. But it's actually one that I'd seen a version of, or something that gave me the basis with my thinking somewhere else. And this is from the sphere of customer success management. So customer success management, very big in IT sector, particularly where it's people buy stuff, but we want them to get the outcomes. They want to get the benefit of the stuff they've bought and ensure that happens. And again, that just resonated with me. It sung to me that kind of, well, that's surely what all salespeople would want, is that I sell you something. You've got to get out of it what you've been buying from me. So I looked at it, I thought, I can just tinker with this a little bit. I can just play with some of the wording and then some of the behaviors and sort of best practice that sits within it to give us this framework where we can mesh these two things together. Yeah, so whatever way you're selling, because you might be selling fairly simplistically, low value, low complexity. You could be in an enterprise sale. It could be a strategic sale over a 2-year sales cycle. Concept is that value framework still will work because you can put into each of these parts of it the bits which makes most sense for you. So it's not sort of fully dogmatic, if you like, as in you must do this, 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 this. It's you make it work for you. Now, I'll give you some suggestions in the book. The book can only be so long. So I use it if I'm consulting, say, okay, well, the company I'm working with, okay, so at this level, they need to do this. In this part, they need to do this. In this part, they need to do this. That's what's going to work for these guys. I can pick and choose. And of course, if they've already invested a lot of time and effort in sales process and certain things, well, we don't want to, we say, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We will take those and say, yeah, let's integrate this into the way we can use and just keep this PQ thinking, this partnering ethos mindset to really kind of turbocharge the stuff that they're doing.
So can you share some? Sorry, carry on.
Well, no. So I mean, I don't know if you're going to ask me to share the value framework and what those. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. It's not a secret. It's in a book. Go buy the book. No, of course I wouldn't do that. No, again, like I say, I want this stuff out there, people thinking about it and using it. So the V of value is about validation. Validate. So in old-fashioned sales terminology, we talk about qualification. Is this a real opportunity? Is this a real kind of prospect? Is it somebody that I can work with? And yes, everyone will have their favorite way of qualifying and validating. So there's Ment and Bant and ManTC and Scotsman and all, whatever, pick your favorite. I don't want to change that. You can have an ideal customer profile, all of those things, whatever you're using. What I suggest, though, is adding another element to it, which is do some kind of psychological qualification, because it does take two to tango. And yes, I want to work with a partnering type mindset. I'm going to use this ethos, but if I'm not going to get it back, it's going to make it very difficult for me to do that. So just add in another layer to think, this is how I need to operate. Will I get this stuff back? So we can validate and think, yes, this is looking like a very good way in which we can work well together to create mutual value. So now I need to align. So the alignment is almost like the homework, the desk work. It's the preparation. It's the understanding about the organization that I want to go and sell to. KYC, know your customer. So it's, again, it depends on the level of how much prep you would put into it. How much prep? There is always prep. Yeah, but it's just thinking about, I need to know about them. I need to know where I could potentially add value, what that might look like. And again, more simple sale, it could be quite an easy thing to do. More complex is quite a lot of work to think about, well, what is this value proposition going to look like? Because that will help us in the next part of L, for leverage. So leveraging all that work, leveraging this area in which I think I can add value, and having those conversations. Because in the end of the day, people do need to work with other people, and we need to make sure that all the different parts of the buying committee or the decision-making unit are really understanding what they're getting from it. So that's the L part. U is underpin. So, okay, yes, we can see this. There's certainly lots of opportunity. There's potential here. It's all very exciting. Yeah, I can take some pain away from you. I can give you gain as well. All the good stuff that we could talk about. I need to prove that. Underpin is propping up. I need to prove that. So I need to get the right proposal to you. I need to make the right pitch, the right presentation. It needs to go to the right people. I know this is a matter quite close to your heart. And I've really got to make sure that that is landing correctly with the customer at the core of all the stuff I'm saying. And that's the main takeaway from that. So many people are too self-centered, can be so customer-centered. So this is how we can work together, which hopefully keeps the thing moving on. And the E is about then evolving the relationship, because we're talking more here about longer-term, ongoing sales opportunities. So that's the VALUE: validate, align, leverage, underpin, and evolve.
Great. So tell me, I mean, can you relate some actual stories of customers where you saw these each, I mean, any of these or each of these playing out?
Yeah, and again, another thing I do in the book is sort of just say, well, sales, there are different levels of it. As I've said, this value and complexity type model, and I call it, for want of labels, and people tend to have their own, but I'll talk about a classic sale being quite simple, then a more consultative is the word I use. I'm happy with solution sell. For me, they're very, very similar. Yeah, we could debate long into the evening, I'm sure, but it's very similar. But as we move up the spectrum, we're into a more value-based sale. So that's probably more of that kind of thinking about how I can bring something to the party. Top end, there is enterprise. Hey, if you want to call it strategic, I'm not going to argue. I think it's the characteristic of the thing we're doing.
Right.
And so I've worked with companies on all levels there. And, you know, some of the work I have quite enjoyed was working with a brewery. I did a lot of research in that one. But yeah, working with a brewery, which actually, when you look at it, you'd say their sale is probably more classic because they've got quite a lot of meetings that they have with their customers. But the value framework still works. They've got to make sure that the customer can buy the beer from them. Where can they add value? Because it's not just about selling beer. It's about actually it's helping them to build their business. It could be the club, it could be the bar, it could be the nightclub, whatever. How do you have a conversation with the different people involved? There's not usually just one person still, even on quite a simple sale. How do you write a proposal? How do you get that through? How do you then keep that going on? So we talk about rate of sale in that industry. So in quite a simplistic thing, yes, it works. Yeah. Guys in IT, or I've done quite a lot of work with people selling chemicals as well. Mm-hmm. Now, chemicals are about as much as a commodity as you can get. If you think about it, it has to be the same as the competitor to do the job it has. But the sale is so complex. I mean, these are big numbers with lots of people involved, lots of potential, where engineers get involved because it has to be the right formulation, like we said. Procurement are all over this. Yeah, financial options are very important on it. We'll talk about sometimes where the chemicals are being used and how it might actually impact on how the company makes their own sale. So you start with their marketing department. So again, that bigger ticket stuff and more ongoing stuff, absolutely, I'll come back and go, yeah, this stuff fits. But they're using slightly different models and slightly different things that you would slot into the framework. But still, it's a useful way to clarify and form your thinking. I sometimes think of the framework a little bit like a chocolate box. You know, you've got the little squares where the chocolates will go, but you pick what chocolates you like in there.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I hate the orange chocolates. I think they're disgusting. I would throw those away all the time. I really love coffee creams. I'd put more coffee creams in than I would the orange bits, and the caramel one's pointless. Yeah, absolutely near there. But you might say, no, Fred, I love the caramel ones. I want to put, well, that suits you better. So you put the chocolates in your box, or you put the sales practices, models, methodologies, pieces of equipment that you use in your sales enablement. It will all fit within there, but this will drive a clearer thinking of helping you with your shift to becoming more and more collaborative, which is where the world is taking us in selling, I think.
So let me focus a bit on PQ. I mean, you said it was the lesser known cousin or brother of IQ and EQ. Why is it so? And how scientific is this this matrix?
Okay, so IQ has been around longer. So, people have been tested in IQ. How intelligent are you since the 30s? And then of course it only tests part of intelligence, doesn't it? It's the sort of the more spatial, verbal, numerical intelligence. And it was kind of the 80s, wasn't it, really, where Daniel Goleman, as probably much as anyone else, really pushed the concept of EQ and saying, hey, look, we're only really thinking about half of what makes somebody really successful. And the studies of EQ show actually that probably has a bigger impact on your success. There's some very interesting stuff around that. And that's got a lot of publicity, if you like, got a lot of stuff highlighted in the 80s. PQ lesser so, because it's just not been talked about as much, I think. But the science behind it, if you like, it was a guy called Steve Dent,
Right.
who was working very much in more formal partnerships and more formal business alliances. The high end stuff where airlines might work together to create the sort of the way in which they operate, to share routes and airports and all this kind of stuff. And he was looking at, why were some successful, why were not, and he did the research into this. And this is why I like PQ as well, because it's not a sort of a let's sit down the pub on a Friday afternoon and make up a concept type thing, which is all good fun, but these are the things. People are doing something here. I want to understand it. And so he started to isolate that these elements were the things which people would be highly skilled in and would be tending to do, sometimes unconsciously. But of course, we know if we can then raise the awareness of this is what you do, make it conscious and make it more repeatable, that's what would make the partnerships work better. And so, I mean, a lot of his work is that he did understand these. He then sort of got his concepts validated and verified, psychologically, more robustly in I should know these off the top of my head, but a couple of American universities. So, if people do push back to, well, PQ is just a made up thing, it isn't. There's been quite a lot of work in it. I've not put it in the book. I didn't put a lot around that whole process. Again, I'm writing it for salespeople. I think they probably go, oh, just does it work? Yes, okay, I can see that there is some substance behind it. That's great. I can look that up if I want. Let's get into the how can I use this stuff?
Right.
And that's what I've done, is sort of take it and then just taken a bit of poetic license with it and just morphed it and made it a little bit more accessible and obvious, as in what that means in a selling role rather than a more pure partnering role, if you like.
You talk about how the future is going to unfold, and in sales at the end of the book, right? And I'm just wondering, what do you see? Where do you see this going? I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'll keep them to myself, and I would like you to talk about where you think this is headed.
I mean, obviously, virtual selling was kind of starting, but we've all been forced into it, and it sort of made its entrance far faster and far more completely than probably it would have done. And I think it's here to stay. Again, that's probably not a massively brave prediction. I think there are some people that are going, yeah, well, let's just wait until it gets back to normal and we'll be okay. And I kind of picture these guys sort of sat at the door with their sort of briefcase packed, waiting to go out for meetings again. And I'm thinking, guys, please, please, please see the light, because that's not going to happen. There's customers, there's people that I'm working with are just saying, we can go into site, but nobody else can. I had a meeting with the managing director the other day, and he wants me to come to site. The board would not allow him. So, these guys out the briefcase, you're going to have to get better at doing stuff virtually. And God knows how long COVID is going to be around for. But let's say it went away tomorrow, I think the practices of virtual, people are actually getting quite comfortable with, and are saying, you know what, actually, it's pretty cool because deals can move along faster. And rather than saying, because we've had to wait, let's make a great big deal of this meeting, it's we only need to talk for 20 minutes to say, right, you're doing that, I'm doing that, he's doing that, great. Well, let's do that. Let's get back together 2 weeks' time. Bang. So virtual, people will start to see this. They'll start to realize that actually the collaboration tools within it, when we get a little bit more comfortable with whiteboarding and we start to sort of share files better and look at things, and I know this is massively part of an area you're into, so I'm preaching to the converted, if you like. it can speed things up quite a lot because we just get used to this means of communication. I don't, though, think that that's it. Sell the car. You don't need to buy shoes ever again. You'll be working in your slippers forever. I don't think that's going to be the case. And so I'm using the language, and I know other people are using the language of hybrid salespeople.
Right.
So it's sales guys that very comfortable doing the stuff like this. They'll probably go virtual meeting, virtual meeting, virtual meeting. Now we're having a live meeting because it does make sense at this stage within the process to get key stakeholders in a room. Actually, we do need to do a factory visit. They want to see where we make the stuff. You know, we've got to do demos. We've got to do tastings. I work with companies that sell flavor. They're working virtually. I can send you samples. You can test. So it'll be people that can sort of just go, well, this is great. I've got another string to my bow. I've got another tool. I'm quite happy to go and stand in the boardroom. I'm quite happy to talk to a boardroom over this means and emails and. So I think hybrid selling is the way that it's going in actually the day-to-day sales activity. But all of that activity is about becoming more and more collaborative. How do we pick the people that we can work together? Because I can help you, you can help me, we can move the thing forward faster, and we might bring other people in. So it's not just two parties necessarily, or two companies. So I think collaborative hybrid would be the.
I completely agree, and that's a great point. Hybrid and collaborative. Yes, that's great. Anything you think you'd like to talk about the book, which I might not have asked you in the meantime?
No, I mean, I think you give me a brilliant platform to share the stuff that's in there. We talk about sales is changing, or I talk about sales is changing. I talk about PQ being something that's very interesting for us to understand. I talk about here are some really good solid ways of working. And in the book there's a lot of reference to other books and other excellent sales writing. Why not? They've done a far better job than me in explaining how they've researched stuff. But then let's bring it together using value, and we step through the value framework, and it is a framework rather than a process, I think. And again, we might be talking semantics here, but it's pick the bits that work for you. Just because in the book, because I have to write in a certain way, I might say that this tool is probably more used in value-based selling. If you say, well, actually, I'd look and say I'm probably more classic, but we do that. Brilliant. If that's working for you, great. Do the right thing, but use this to inform your thinking to make sure you're doing the right things. I like my analogies. I like my food analogies as well. I don't know, maybe it's near lunchtime here in the UK. So, but it's almost like I would say that if I'm working with a company, they could say, well, they might see this PQ thing and say, Fred, this is great. We want to put the icing on the cake for what we've got. And I'll say, super. I will come along and let's put the icing on the cake. Let's just have a look at the cake, though, that we're going to ice and make sure it's there. And we can look at it and go, yeah, you've got such a solid way of working. That is exactly what we're doing. We're putting icing on and a cherry on the top. It could be that we say, you know what? We're not really icing a cake here. The cake isn't such a good thing. It's falling apart. It's not so solid. We need to be baking it better. But what we can do is we can sort of bake the cake with all the lovely bits we're putting the icing in it as we do this. So it could be something that's quite a large transformation for somebody, or it could be something where they take it and say, yeah, no, this is great. I can just add the bits that you're talking about here to what I'm doing successfully already. So, again, it works for all types of sales. It works for people at all stages of their sales development, if you like.
So you have 12 chapters, and you have spoken about the traditional selling processes till chapter 2, right? I mean, the accepted sales methodologies and all that.
Yep. Let me just get it just to check.
Yeah. So you're telling me about the structure, how you actually put it all together, the narrative flow.
Yeah. So a little bit just about why the book and how you can use it. Thinking about changing world of sales. It was written pre-COVID. As I say, you could write a whole book that thick on it. So then we just think about what's selling, where's selling come from, that evolutionary thing that I spoke about, and then those different sales types just so that people can go, okay, I'm more or less there. Yeah, it makes sense. And as I say, with my sort of hidden agenda, it's like, don't say to me it won't work for me, because it will. Then go into them a little bit more and saying, okay, so this is how I'm defining it. And again, I'm not saying it's the be all and end all definition. It's just a way to understand that there is these slight differences. But I do talk about shades of grey. It's shades of grey along a spectrum where you'll be nearer to one than the other. That's the selling bit. So then we go, okay, partnering skills, what are they? Yeah. So a little bit about IQ and EQ, like I did when we were chatting. We talk about partnering, and I do spend a little bit of time talking about pure partnering, so where it originally came from, because again, if that's what we're using as the basis of what we're thinking about, it's useful to have that. You know, there might be channel managers reading it, or people go, actually, no, I am selling pure partnerships. This is the best chapter. This is the best the best bit, because you're talking how to make a partnership. And you said something earlier, and I wrote down here a paraphrase of what you said, which was, if you're going into business with somebody, you are effectively partnering with them anyway, whether you call it or not, you know. So I talk about that, and then we talk about just that mindset that the salesperson needs to have. So then we talk more about how we can just start to think about them in sales. So I break down those elements. So trust, how does that look in sales? So I'm getting more specific into sales world here. Win-win, again, that's probably the easiest bit to write. Interdependence, okay, that's building on the win-win we've had. Self-disclosure and feedback is quite interesting, because it's not just getting feedback from customers, it's giving feedback to customers. It's also giving information that you might not think, well, why would I tell them that stuff? Because it'll build the relationship better. We talk about future orientation. That's again because that's one of the partnering skills, and that's where we need to be looking, both for our decision making, but where we can add value better. And then we talk about change, comfort with change. So again, I should probably, if I was rewriting it, I'd probably start with that one now, as in we've been plunged into huge amounts of change. But what I talk about more in the book is that the salesperson is a change agent. They've got to help customers with change. More often than not, they need to be doing something differently and might not know how to do that. So understanding change a little bit, helping people, facilitating them with that makes a lot of sense. We then got a little section. People love, I've found when I've been doing training, whenever we're doing anything where people understand more about themselves, it always goes down really well. So we've got a little bit of a kind of a self-analysis tool. So a little questionnaire where you just think, you know, where do I sit on each of those? Which am I strong in? Which can I develop more in? We do that. I then introduced value framework just as a concept, as I talked about there, but then we break it down bit by bit. And so there's a chapter for each of those sections. So chapter on validate, where within the chapter there's validate at classic selling level, and move it on to consultative, and move it on and move it on. So it kind of build. Yeah. And repeat. So then underpin, classic, consultative, value-based, enterprise. So it's kind of almost getting more sophisticated as you read through the chapter. You know, I wouldn't say to somebody, oh, I've got to my bit, stop. It's look, because you could still say, well, what you're talking about there, I don't want to repeat myself, but I can pull that back in and do what I'm doing. Yeah, dead right. So that takes up a decent chunk, if you like, because the five chapters, 5 elements. And then the future bit there, it's actually that part is more, well, what's your future? What are you going to do with it? It's all very well reading a book and having knowledge, yeah, but it's about application. It's about doing something. It's great, yeah, I've done it, I know more now, brilliant, but what are you going to do with that? So how can you, either as a sales leader, use this to help your team, or as a sales practitioner, as a salesperson, what can you do? How can you apply some of this? What little changes are you going to make to improve yourself? And there's some suggestions and some trigger questions, if you like, to get people thinking about what can they do to make a difference for themselves. Because that's the bit that floats my boat.
Absolutely.
You know, I want to help people.
That makes complete sense, and this is great, Fred. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope you had a good time.
No. It's I've enjoyed it. You asked me some great questions.
Next week, we start the series Fixing the 5% Problem in B2B Sales. Over the following 8 weeks, we'll bring you engaging discussions with 24 world-renowned experts about the elephant in the room, the abysmally low rate of conversion in B2B sales. Meet Phil Kreindler, CEO of InfoTeam Sales Process Consulting AG, Carol Mahoney, founder and chief sales coach at Unbound Growth, and Daryl Prail, CRO at VanillaSoft.
I think a big issue is the definition of what is a lead, yeah, in B2B, yeah?
Yes.
And then, of course, once you've got clarity on what really is a qualified lead, then, of course, you've got a whole load of things you have to do in the sales process to convert the leads into orders. But I mean, in my opinion, it starts with a mismatch between what marketing says is a lead and what sales says is a lead. Somebody views one of our webinars, that is called a lead. That's bullshit. Yeah?
Yes.
That is a name. It's somebody who is interested in the content and decides to spend, an hour looking at something. But, that's an example. That is, I would say it's a name, it's a suspect, yeah, but I wouldn't call it a lead.
How do we get more people to raise their hands? Because it's so expensive to try to, dump leads into a funnel that has all kinds of holes in it and is leaking. Like I used to use the metaphor of, imagine poor Jack and Joe when they went up the hill to fetch a pail of water and the pail was full of holes. How many times did they have to go back and forth? It's tiring, it's expensive. So in marketing, I was always focused on the conversion rate. I was also focused on making it buyer first, because in the age of the internet, we no longer have control over the process. The people have the power of the information. And so it's no surprise that the internet has changed the way that we buy and sell. And then what was happening in my marketing agency is that as I was making, and the marketing world was making the transition to online and buyer focused and, developing real, buyer journey paths, sales was still using the same sort of tactics that they used in the 80s and the early 90s. ABC still meant always be closing. And I was finding the clients that I was working with, no matter how many leads we would deliver, would hardly get any sales from it.
So these industries never change unless the people who are on top of the food chain force it down. And you can see examples of that, whether it be Amazon, because a lot of the manufacturers are creating commodities that are sold through that channel, or Walmart as an example, or automotive, Ford, GM, et cetera. They don't change. There's no incentive for them to change. So if 5% is the number they've got, that's just their normal, right? So they don't know that this is bad. This is the way it's always been. And then if you look at, well, if we need to invest to change that, their budgets aren't structured that way. They might be investing 1%, 2% at most in marketing. You look at software, they'll invest 12% or more.
I'm super excited about this series. My guests certainly were. And I can't wait to hear from you, all your views. Check the link below and in the attachment for you to record your views, and we will start incorporating them into the show from episode 20 that airs on 21st of May. And finally, what is the absolute basic stuff that you need to get right for your customers? Here is Stuart Butterfield, co-founder and CEO of Slack, speaking to the students of Stanford Graduate School of Business in January 2020.
There's very basic fundamental things that you have to get right, and which aren't the interesting ones. In fact, someone tweeted something the other day, which I liked, that kind of illustrates this from a different perspective. And it's someone asking Ray Kroc, the kind of founder and for CEO of McDonald's, why was McDonald's so successful? And he says, because we have clean bathrooms. And they say, that's easy. That's so simple. That doesn't explain it. And Ray Kroc said, are your bathrooms clean? And it actually is like a challenge. So there's some real fundamentals, but the things that we did that were most successful were those things which made life more convenient for people. And one of those was, for example, typing your password on your phone is a pain, so we'll send you a magic link that logs you in. Or because for complex reasons, most people wanted to have notifications for every message in Slack when they first signed up, so they felt comfortable and knew how it worked. But we didn't think that was a good way for them to set their preferences long term. After a few notifications, we would interject and say, would you like to switch to our preferred settings? And that kind of thoughtfulness or consideration, that kind of thinking of yourself as a host and the customers as your guests, I think is the secret, as it were, to good design.
Thinking of your customer as a guest, thoughtfulness and consideration are key to great customer experience design. The whole interview is about an hour long, and we will share the link to the complete session in our next XO newsletter. Time to wrap up the show for today. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and convert more.